Good evening. My name is David Cohen, and I am the proud president of Five Towns College, located in the town of Huntington, here in Suffolk County. It is my honor to welcome you to this Meet the Candidates event sponsored by the League of Women Voters. This event is made possible not just by the League, but by the students and faculty of the Mass Communication Department here at Five Towns College. From production to streaming and everything in between, these future broadcasters are using all of the knowledge, skills, and competencies that they are learning in class to make this event possible. Five Towns College is a comprehensive institution of higher education, which focuses on media and the performing arts. The college offers accredited undergraduate and graduate degree programs on a beautiful residential campus. The college's small size and small classes make it the right size for most students to pursue their dreams. You can learn more about Five Towns College. Visit us on the web at ftc.edu. That's ftc.edu. And now it is my privilege to welcome the candidates to Five Towns College. I know that they have all prepared for this event and are anxious to share their thoughts with you. I hope you will pay close attention, and when we're done, that you will be a more informed voter at the end. Thank you for spending time with us this evening, and welcome again to virtual Five Towns College.
Hello, my name is Emily Granados, and thank you for joining us for the 2020 Meet the Candidates Night. Today, I'm with the president of the League of Women Voters of Huntington, Elizabeth Valheimer. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, tell me, what is it like to be a part of the League of Women Voters of Huntington, and what exactly do the League of Women Voters do?
Well, the League of Women Voters has been around for 100 years, just before women fought and won the right for the vote. Our ancestors are the suffragists. We feel very strongly about that and are very proud of our history. We are really all about education. We educate people to vote, how to go about it. We are constantly reaching out to everyone, putting out flyers, the voting dates, the locations, the times. There's a lot of changes this year due to COVID. Now voting by mail, it used to be that we had to have a reason for an absentee ballot. Governor Cuomo changed that due to COVID. We can use the excuse of there's no, temporary illness, so we can vote by mail. It really is all about education, all about the vote, not just for president, although of course this year, that is, what everybody's talking about, what everybody's focused on. But in many ways, your local elections affect your life a lot more. Who you're voting for in your town or village is affecting, maybe if your streets get paved or, trees get cut down. It really, from the top down, it's so important to vote. It's our voice. It's the way we speak.
It truly is. Now, what advice would you have for, young voters who maybe think that, well, I'm one in a million of people, like, why does my vote make a difference?
Every vote counts. I know it's a platitude and everybody says it, but it's the truth. And if nothing else, the last election was super close. The last presidential election was super close. Every vote counted. Don't give your voice away. And it's your future. Young people are more important than anybody. It is your future. It is going to be your taxes. It is going to be how you live. It's so important. And it's our civic duty. My family came from Cuba. They lost all their rights to vote. They woke up one day and were not able to vote any longer. It is really so important to me. And as it should be important to everybody. Really and if you're not aware, if you're not familiar with the candidates, go do some research. go on their websites. You know, if you're distrusting of some media, go on each candidate's website, see what their stances are on issues and who you agree with. You're not going to agree with everybody on everything, but you'll get a good sense of them and where you fall in that, and vote for that person. If you do nothing else, go vote.
Completely. And if somebody's voting for the first time and wants some good information, what are some resources that they can go and look for?
You can go on vote411.org. You can go on governmentnewyork.org. Both excellent sites to get all the information you need. You can get an absentee ballot. You can get all the information. Vote411.org is a great site. It's actually the League of Women Voters site. You can put in your address if you're not sure of who is running in your district. Find out who's running. You can get all the information there, and then do all the research that you want to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Elizabeth. And remember, everybody, to stay tuned for more coverage of the 2020 Meet the Candidates Night. I'm Emily Granados, reporting from home.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Forum. Today is October 14th. This particular event is for New York State Senate District 2 with Michael Siderakis and Mario Matera, as well as Senate District 5 with Jim Gorin and Ed Smith. My name is Lisa Scott. I'll be the moderator for this event. And our timekeeper is Stephanie Quarles, who is a board member of the League of Women Voters as well. The rules for today's debate are as such. The moderator reviews the details, and the moderator has the final say in any decision-making that comes up. There will be 1 minute opening statements by the candidates. The candidates have drawn lots and they'll proceed in order. The way it'll start is for Senate District 2, Mr. Matera will go first with his opening statement, then Mr. Siderakis, and then for SD5, Mr. Smith, and then Mr. Gorin. And my job will be to keep a rotation going so the same person doesn't go first for every question. The questions have been prepared in advance by the League of Women Voters of Huntington. I have them. We'll get through as much of the list as we can. Each candidate will be responding for 1 minute, and Stephanie will raise a sign at 30 seconds, and also one that concludes the 1 minute, a stop sign. We ask that every candidate please just finish your phrase, a couple of seconds. Make notes. If there is something you really want to get into, make sure you get into that at the end when you do your summation or closing. Because we have 4 candidates and a lot of questions, we will not be doing rebuttals on today's event. Again, the rules are those that were promulgated by the League of Women Voters of Huntington. All the candidates have signed off from them. As with any league debate, it's all about education and civility. And again, this is only being recorded as a closed Zoom. It will be posted online. And the candidates have all agreed to keep it in its entirety. No part of this is to be used for any campaign snapshot that could be taken out of context. And again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Huntington, we really, really appreciate the candidates coming virtually to this gathering and helping all of us decide how to vote absentee, early, or on election day. Thank you very much. So we have opening statements by the candidates. These are 1 minute. Again, please just finish your phrase. I'd prefer not to have to interrupt anyone, but we need to move along. So I'm happy to welcome Mr. Matera.
Hello, and I just want to thank the League of Women Voters of Huntington. Lisa and Stephanie, thank you so much for hosting this and having me today. My name is Mario Matera. I am running the 2nd District, Senate District over here in the East Islip, East Northport, Dix Hills, Smithtown area, Center Reach, Selden, a little bit of Farmingville. I'm 57 years old. I'm a 55-year resident of our great town of Smithtown. I am married to my beautiful wife, Terry, for 26 years. I have two daughters, Jessica, 22. She's going to Stony Brook University. We're very proud of that. And Jamie, she is 18 years old, and she is a 12th grader at Smithtown East High School. I am very proud to be a kick line dad for the Smithtown East Whisperettes. I'm just praying that they're going to be able to play this year. I am a business agent with Plumbers Local Union 200. I'm a close to 40-year member, 25 years of me being a member. I've been an officer and 18 years. Sorry?
Thank you. Stephanie, you have to keep the sign up, please. Okay, thank you.
That was a minute already?
That was 1 minute, yes. But again, you can incorporate some of your statement at the end again, too, if you wish. Okay. Mr. Sidorakis, SD2.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you again, and thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this very important event. I wanted to start off. My name is Mike Sidorakis. I'm running for Senate District 2, New York State Senate. First and foremost, I am the only candidate with law enforcement experience. My opponent's campaign is financed by corporate and PAC monies. The most disturbing is that my opponent has received tens of thousands of dollars from union leaders who have been indicted on allegations of corruption charges as reported by Newsday on October 1st of this month. One of those unions mentioned in the indictment is Local 200 Plumbers Union, in which Mr. Matera is a business agent. Mr. Matera should return the questionable contributions. My campaign has been funded mostly by smaller individual donations. As your senator, I will work full-time to represent the constituents of District 2.
Thank you. Now we move on to Senate District 5. The first person to go is Mr. Smith.
Thank you. My name's Ed Smith. I first want to start by wishing my father a happy birthday today, Dad. I know he's going to be watching down in Florida. He's 83 years old today, so happy birthday. My wife, Coriander, and I both grew up in Huntington. We've lived here all our lives. I've been a practicing lawyer here in Huntington for 23 years. I'm a former Marine Staff Sergeant. I'm very persuasive about the issues I care about. I'll work with anybody who shares my concerns, regardless of their political party. I'm very concerned about the future of Long Island and my children's future here because of the high cost of living and about taxes and the lack of new industry coming to Long Island. I'm worried they're going to go to more progressive areas of the country in terms of economics. First and foremost, if elected, I will repeal the disastrous bail reform bill. The bail system did need reform for truly low-level nonviolent crimes, such as motor vehicle offenses. However, this was a Trojan horse that brought in very serious crimes, often facing decades in prison. I'm a strong supporter of term limits, and I'm a strong supporter of reopening our economy safely with the advice and consent of public health officials.
Thank you. Thank you. Time's up.
That's a quick minute.
Yeah, you don't realize till you get going on it. And
true.
I know all four of you have a lot you want to share, so we appreciate your cooperation. Mr. Gorin.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the League and to and my colleagues running for office, Ed, and happy birthday to your dad. And I also want to thank the folks at Five Towns College who are doing this, which, little tidbit, was my junior high school years ago, aging myself. But I've been proud to be the state senator for this district for the last 2 years. I was a county legislator and a town councilman in Huntington a number of years ago. I've been working very hard. We have reformed our criminal justice system, tough, strong environmental act. We passed the Child Victims Act, electoral reforms, a lot of important things we have done. There's a lot more to do. Now, my office, we have been fighting to try to help people get through this COVID crisis. The state has both a health and an economic crisis and a social crisis. And it is my hope to get a second term where I'm going to work very hard to try to bring New York back better than ever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll start the questions. Just so you know, I have about 17 questions that have been submitted. We'll get through as much as we can. They are grouped by topic. I may skip around a little bit. We'll see how the conversations go. Mr. Siderakis, this first one comes to you. And again, you'll all get the same question in 1 minute to respond. And please keep your eye on Stephanie, particularly with her last white sign, which is done. So finish your thought, but don't keep going. Mr. Siderakis, what has your campaign identified as the top issues to address if you are elected to the New York State Senate?
All right. Thank you, Lisa, for that question. During the campaign, it's been extremely difficult to campaign during COVID-19. Obviously, this pandemic has really changed focus from normal campaigning. The biggest issues that have come up is those in education, healthcare, our environment, and public safety. And I'll just touch quickly on them. Education system, we've seen with COVID-19, the inequities that are within our education system from zip code to zip code. In our healthcare system, we've seen also the inequities of how people receive healthcare throughout the state, and also our public safety. We had, situations where protests, some protests were held very peacefully, and then there were separate riots that accompanied those protests.
Okay, thank you very much. Same question, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith says disconnected.
A minute's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. All right. I hope you agree. If when he does appear, we can't go backwards, but I'll include him even if we're in the cycle and his turn just happened. Okay. Mr. Gorin.
Well, the top issue that will be facing the next legislature that's elected, there are all sorts of issues, protecting our education, our environment, so many things, but there's really going to be one overwhelming issue, and that is how are we going to rebuild this state after COVID? We have a tremendous crisis in the state in terms of our economics. We don't have the sales tax or the income tax revenue. We desperately need money from the federal government to give us back just a little bit of the money we have sent down there for decades. And it is so important that we get that money, because what we then have to do is figure out how we can avoid making cuts to our public education, to our hospitals, to our police, across the board. It is essential that we receive these funds, and then as a state, we need to have plans to show how we're going to build back economically, how we're going to improve our healthcare system, and quite frankly, how we're going to bring people from all parts of our communities together.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera, same question.
Yes, I'm very, very been involved with the law enforcement, and very, very proud that I have all law enforcement endorsement and sit on the Suffolk County District Attorney's Advisory Task Force for Unscrupulous contractors. So getting to Mr. Siderakis' comment before, you know what? There's a reason why I sit on all these boards. And I sit on the boards of Suffolk County Water Authority for our precious water supply. I do sit on the one of the board members also with St. James Civic to make sure that we're doing the infrastructure properly, because that's more important than anything right now, is infrastructure for our future growth. To protect what's going on with our tax structure, education. Again, this COVID-19 to get businesses back to work, to look at businesses like Amazon, to make sure Amazon is paying their fair share with the profits they're making, and making sure our mom and pop stores are protected. So you know what? Right now, law enforcement, the bail reform, the defunding, all this is terrible. And one thing about my opponent, he should really look in the mirror and say, why didn't he get all endorsement for law enforcement? And I did. There's a reason for that.
Can I answer that, Lisa?
No, I'm really sorry, but in this debate, they said no rebuttals. They're not my rules. These were determined by the Huntington board. You'll have to do it. Keep taking notes. That's what the closing statements are for. Okay. Mr. Gorin, we're going to start with you, but before I do, if the Five Towns technical people are on, I hope they can reach out to Mr. Smith. I'm presuming he had a Wi-Fi failure or something because he was on his cell phone. So hopefully he'll be in. Mr. Gorin, with the increased polarization of the political parties throughout the nation, what would you do as a New York State Senator to bring people together after the election?
We have a crisis in this country in that we don't have civility in a lot of our public discourse. And quite frankly, a lot of that has started right at the top in our country. But there's too much going on at the extremes, extreme left, extreme right. What we need is for everybody to come together, and we're going to disagree. Let's disagree civilly, but let's see where we can find common ground. I've done that my whole career as a county legislator, as a town councilman. I worked very closely with Republicans, and as a senator, as difficult as it is in Albany, because it's much more partisan. I worked very hard to work with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I worked with former Senator Flanagan, to fight for our communities when we were dealing with this huge LIPA tax certiorari issue. I've worked with Senator Laval on environmental issues. It's important to work together. I am going to continue to try to fight for that in Albany. And it really is just a question of everybody is sitting down and talking.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera?
Yes, this is so important. Even sitting with our great, our senator, Jim Gorin, he was my chairman with Suffolk County Water Authority, and I'm very, very proud of that, what we have done, working together. I've always worked with both sides, with all the legislators in Suffolk County. I was a Suffolk County agent, and I worked with all elected officials for our needs, especially with the sewage treatment plants, to make sure that, that all the chemicals and all the toxins, everything that was getting dumped into the groundwater, that we need to make sure we protect that every day, to put state-of-the-art sewage treatment plants, just like the one in Riverhead. I was very proud to lobby and work with the town of Riverhead for that sewage treatment plant, and the Hauppauge Industrial Park. So now we could grow the proper growth over in Hauppauge Industrial Park and bring in great paying jobs for our future. So one thing I've done is work very, very hard with elected officials on both sides. And again, roll your sleeves up, sit there, get the job done. And one thing I'm very, very proud of what I've done with Lake Avenue, with the town of Smithtown. $10 million worth of work is being done right now for our future. We were in such dire straits in Smithtown.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Sidorakis, same question.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. Well, I've spent my entire lifetime in public service. I have nearly 3 decades of experience as a New York State trooper with the New York State Police. 2017 to 2019, the 3 years prior to the time I retired, I spent as the second vice president and legislative director of the New York State Troopers PBA. So I've spent my time up in Albany. I've worked with Senator Gorin. I've worked with all the senators on Long Island, all the 9 senators, including assembly members from both sides of the aisle. I worked with Senator Flanagan when he was the majority leader and minority leader of the Senate. And I've worked with the leadership on the Democratic side with Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins when she was the leader on both sides. So I have the experience up in Albany, working on issues, trying to come to agreements, even though we don't agree with many issues, certain people, especially when it comes to law enforcement. We all sat down at the table, listened to each other, and everybody made the decisions that were necessary for their constituents.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Before I start the first big topic, I just want to advise that the tech people and Mr. Smith have reached out to each other. He did drop the connection. He's trying to get back in. However,
I'm back on audio right now. I'm working on the video.
Okay. You want to take
whatever they said.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So, Mr. Smith, do you want to take the question? We're just about to start another one, so I can give you missed one round, but I have one for you.
That's fine. I'll take a question.
This question is, with the increased polarization of the political parties throughout the nation, What would you do as a New York State Senator to bring people together after the election?
Well, I would start by saying that, I have no problem working with anybody of any political persuasion. It's evidenced by the fact I'm running on the Libertarian line, the Republican line, the Conservative line, the Independence Party line. I have broad support across the political spectrum. I've worked with Democrats in the town of Huntington. I have no problem. I look at things from a purely a beneficial standpoint for how the constituents are going to benefit from it. I am not a person that tries to grandstand and get attention or credit for anything. I have no problem giving credit to somebody else if they want it. I will work across the aisle if the law makes sense. The first thing I would do, I think I'd get broad support on, is term limits for every elected official in the entire state. Dog catcher to governor. And I think that's something that most reasonable people would agree on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, you can't see anything, right? You're only doing a telephone?
Right now, yes, I'm still working on.
Okay, because
go ahead.
The countdown is the only thing I want to make sure, because again, I don't want to interrupt people, but I do have to keep it on time. Okay.
Yeah, you feel free to interrupt me. I'll talk forever if you don't.
Okay, thank you. The first big topic that we have prepared questions is law and order. And I'm going to start with Mr. Matera on this, and we can get back in the cycle. So this is the question for all of you. Again, 1 minute. What policies would you pursue to promote social and racial justice in New York State?
We talked about this before, that even with Plumbers Local 200, we have a zero tolerance for anybody with racial situations, and we definitely, unity, solidarity, get people together, especially when there's problems. When 9/11 hit, everybody says, what happened to 9/12? 9/12 was a day when everybody got together. It was a tragedy, what happened with our whole world. And one thing that got people together, but one thing that I've done as a union leader, I organized the unorganized with people. And we, with our local, we care about all parties, anybody, any race, ethnic groups. And I'm very, very proud that I've always got people to the table, worked together, and made sure that, in other words, that everybody is treated fairly. And that's one thing I've always done. I could care less what color you are. If you're purple, I will make sure that we always get groups together and make sure that we have solidarity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matera. Mr. Siderakis, same question.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, the first thing I would do is we'd have to sit down, members of the law enforcement unions, elected officials, members of the community, churches. We all have to start listening and figuring out what the actual deep-rooted issues are and what the problems are before we can come up with the solutions for them. So we're going to have to really listen to each other. And like I said, I've worked with both sides of the aisle, and I'm here to listen to all sides and come up with actual solutions that work. With my background in law enforcement, I'm very familiar with the policies and procedures that are in law enforcement and with different agencies. And I have many ideas and solutions on how we can bring back the trust to law enforcement officers by the community.
Okay, thank you. And now, Mr. Smith, you're right in time for your turn.
I think the question was
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for this.
Yeah. What policies would you pursue to promote social and racial justice in New York State?
Well, first off, I would start by saying I have a zero tolerance for any kind of discrimination. But most importantly, I think in enforcing, quite frankly, the Bill of Rights in its entirety is the first step towards public justice. It is our North Star for anybody, and particularly the Fourth Amendment. I would strictly adhere to it. I would expect everybody to, and I would restore discretion back for judges, allowing them to use their judicial discretion particularly in criminal justice cases. And if there was a problem with the criminal justice system in our state, it should have been addressed at the judicial level and not by a wholesale sweeping of the criminal justice laws and getting rid of them. If there was a problem, it should have been addressed where the problem existed, and that would have been at the judicial level if judges were not adjudicating their cases fairly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorin.
I will continue to do what I do as a senator. Reach out to all organizations, all groups, all churches, all denominations. I've set up meetings where I brought various people together. And I voted for criminal justice reforms because they were important to make sure that particularly people in communities of color do not have a different system of justice, or people who are economically deprived than others. Minority and women-owned businesses. I serve on the Economic Development Committee in the State Senate, and I've been very active in promoting that. And voting rights. We have to continue to expand voting rights, because by doing the early voting, and now we're doing no excuse absentee balloting, which will be the second portion of the constitutional amendment process next. That is something that is going to help to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. And economic rights as well. We have to continue to work on increasing the minimum wage. We passed a prevailing wage, because economic justice is part of racial and social justice as well.
Thank you. Next question, I'm starting with Mr. Siderakis. Again, under the law and order category, what legislation would you propose to support police reforms in New York State? In what ways might state funding be allocated to decrease burdens on police?
That's a good question. And being a former member of law enforcement, I can tell you that our members their judgment, especially as a former New York State trooper, is fantastic here in New York State. Our training is top notch. I think we need to invest more money into law enforcement rather than looking to take away funds. I think a lot of the solutions are in our recruitment process, filtering out candidates who should not be police officers or troopers, and also in the recruitment process and the screening process. The New York State Police is one of the few agencies that actually uses a polygraph exam in conjunction with the psychological exam to evaluate a candidate's assessment and see whether or not they are eligible or should be police officers. So I think we really need to take a close look at how police departments do their hiring and
thank you.
Come up with solutions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Smith, same question.
Well, I would continue with police oversight, but I think we would have to bring all the police chiefs and the district attorneys to the table to see what police actually work on the field. Again, the repeal of Civil Rights Law 50A, again, was a gross overreaction to what was perceived as a problem of not getting access to police personnel records in cases of abuse. But in repealing 50A, it put the person, every first responder, open to a FOIL request, regardless of what the contents are. Even unsubstantiated complaints against officers are now fair game for anybody that wants to FOIL them. I don't think that should have been done. It should have been left to the discretion of judges, as it was, where judges were the gatekeepers. And if there was a problem with the judges not allowing access to police records, and now it should have been the judges' discretion, and judges should have been retrained if necessary. But now, if you're a firefighter, if you're an ambulance driver, if you're a first responder,
thank you.
You're fair game.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Matera. Same question.
Yes, I'm gonna say law and order is everything, and that's one thing my constituents in my area, that's what they've been talking about. You know, the police reform that they reformed, number one, they've reformed number two. It needs to be repealed. It needs to go back to square one. And obviously the judge discretion, the district attorney's office with the union officials need to get to the table and to come up with a better solution because it's not working. When you look at this list, it's just unacceptable, this list. Yes, we need to do education with training. We do the same thing with my local all the time because training is key with education. But you know what? We need to get the confidence back into our police officers because a lot of them are retiring. Right now, there's a list in the city and on Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk County, that they all want to retire. Then what are we going to do? You have cadets that are leaving also. We have to get the confidence back. We got to make sure that there's not laws passed, like a senator wants to pass a law, that you have to get insurance now on a police officer. They have to get their own personal insurance. No one's going to want to do this job. And no one's going to, we need to make sure we get qualified people. So one thing we have to do is we need to get the confidence back for our police officers to do this job.
Okay. The next question starts with Ms.
Did I?
Oh, Mr. Siderakis. Yeah, you went. Yes.
No, Jim Gorn. Did I?
Did I miss you? I did. My apologies.
That's okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's why you have to interrupt me as well.
Oh, that's all right. That's fine. The only police department that we have any control of directly in terms of funding is the New York State Police Department. And quite frankly, I don't believe Long Island is getting its fair share of those services, and I'm going to be fighting for that. I have introduced legislation to increase penalties anytime a police officer is attacked or any crime is committed against him or her. The penalties can be higher, they can be charged higher, and they can be sentenced higher because we need to show that we have respect and want to protect our hardworking police officers out in our communities. And but you talk about defunding police. You know who's defunding police? Defunding police is the President of the United States and the leader of the United States Senate. They're refusing to give us our state and local money that we desperately need. And Suffolk County is now looking at cutting police simply because we're not getting our money from Washington. So that's where the fight has to be.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for your cooperation on the skipping. Okay, next question would start with Mr. Smith. Domestic terrorism is real and is in our communities. What measures do you support to protect all of us from domestic terrorism?
Well, we could start by, in the bail reform bill, one of the crimes that is no longer bail eligible is money laundering in support of terrorism. So, you talk about a sweeping bail reform bill and supporting police. Okay, if somebody is caught money laundering for terrorists, they're going to be brought before a judge, arraigned, and immediately released back into the community. You'll never see them again. Okay, you're going to have to hope they show up for trial, which it's very unlikely they will. I think any support we could give to the police and the federal agents. There should be total cooperation between state and federal law enforcement in terms of tracking down anybody that's engaging in domestic terrorism and foreign terrorism for that matter. But there has to be cooperation, and this whole idea that there's a firewall between the federal agents and police agents, it has to stop. It's done nothing but kill morale among law enforcement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorin.
Well, domestic terrorism is often caused by people who are here who are Americans. And it is people who go to peaceful protests and try to blow up buildings and throw bricks through windows. And whether they're on the left or the right, you have some young man with a gun being dropped off by his mom in the middle of another protest and shooting people. We have domestic terrorism in this country, and it's coming from the extremes on both sides. So we have to be vigilant against it with all levels of government. Federal government has to cooperate with our state government and our local police. And the first thing is you have to recognize it. That's the big issue I see today, is that with a lot of folks, there isn't a recognition that domestic terrorism is just as bad and in some cases worse than foreign terrorism.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera.
Yes, you know what, this is something just like what I spoke about 9/11. When 9/11 hit, you know, you sit there and you say to yourself, you know, we are the strongest nation in the world. And you sit there and we're sitting there right now with these bail reforms, with all these examples that anybody could get out on, you know, with the crime and get out and continue doing the crime. And this is where we need to make sure we give the tools back to our police officers. You know, the city had for 20 years stop and frisk. Now, all of a sudden, $1.5 billion in defunding of our police officers with task force, in other words, that took care of this. What are we doing now? We have social workers that are doing domestic disputes right now, and we're putting them in harm's way. We need to make sure we fund our police officers so they could do their jobs. Not for anything. This is $20 million in defunding in Suffolk County, which we're very, very concerned about. So you know what? Again, these bail reforms, we need to make sure the people that protect us are funded properly. And that's what I'm going to do when I'm the 2nd Senate District Senator.
Thank you very much. Mr. Siderakis.
All right, thank you. Just to begin, bail is in place just to make sure that people will return in court for their court dates. It's not set on dangerousness of crime. That's not what bail was established for. Everybody's presumed innocent until they're proven guilty in a court.
Really?
So these are accusations made, and the judge makes a decision based on whether somebody will return in court to court or not. So the judges do have a choice to issue bail or not, to allow bail or to remand the subject to prison. But as far as domestic terrorism, working in law enforcement, we work hand in hand with many federal, local agencies. The state police has many joint task forces with the federal government and with local agencies to combat domestic terrorism. So I would ensure that the funding is there to continue those programs and have all the federal, state, and local agencies working hand in hand to prevent any forms of terrorism.
Okay, thank you very much. One more question on law and order, and this one would start with Mr. Gorin. Gun violence is a major problem in our community. What is your position on gun control and gun safety?
Well, that's an area that I'm very proud of because in my first term in the Senate, we've passed about 11 different bills to try to crack down on guns getting in the hands of people who should not have them, including the red flag law, which takes a gun away from somebody through a judicial process if it is determined by a judge that they do not possess, at least at that time, the mental capabilities to have that gun, that they might use it against themselves or someone else. They also, we also passed a bill to ban bump stocks. We passed legislation, which is what happened in Vegas with all those people were killed. And we passed legislation to make sure that if you have a child in the house, your gun is locked and bullets are separate so that we could hopefully avoid so many of these incidents that we have seen. And we're now working to get rid of ghost guns. It passed in the Senate, got to get it passed in the Assembly, which is you can go on the internet and buy all these different parts of a gun and then have an automatic weapon and start shooting people.
Thank you. Mr. Matera, same question?
Yeah, what, one thing, troubling, very concerned. There should be definitely background checks with the gun sellers. And we need to make sure that we're constantly there to protect our constituents in our area. And again, to give our law enforcement, the tools so they can make sure they'll be checking on certain people. And when they get phone calls right now with the defunding of our police, I'm very concerned that this is what's going to happen. It's going to hurt our residents and our constituents in the area, that they're not going to have the proper police protection. So I want to make sure that our police are on board with any kind of task force that we have and a separate division to make sure that we are protected with this terrible gun violence.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Siderakis?
Yes, I just want to start off. I've been around guns for almost the past 30 years. As a retired trooper, I own a gun. I have a gun at home. I'm a safe gun owner. I want to thank Senator Guran for the Senate's work on a lot of gun safety legislation. I was fortunate enough to befriend Linda Beagle-Schulman and hear her story of what happened to her son down in Florida during the mass shooting. And, you know, it's really important that I'm pro Second Amendment, and people should have the right to own guns, but we have to ensure that there are background checks, and people who aren't mentally capable of owning a gun or responsible shouldn't have guns. And I think the red flag legislation was a very good piece of legislation that's probably saved lives.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I support background checks and extensive background checks and mental health checks. For anybody purchasing a weapon, but anybody who voted for this bail reform bill cannot be taken serious about gun control. If you look at it, criminal possession of a firearm, catch and release, possession of a bump stock, you'll be charged and immediately released. A gun on school grounds, weapon on school grounds, immediately released. An undetectable firearm, shotgun, or rifle, okay, a ghost gun. If you're charged, you'll be immediately released back onto the street. This is what bail reform is really about. It's about 300 different crimes where the judge has no discretion to hold the defendant. They're immediately released back into the community. So I implore everybody to take a look at this list of crimes. It's astonishing what's on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to several questions on the environment. And the person who will go first now is Mr. Matera. I'm sorry, yeah, Mr. Matera. What do you see as the most important environmental issue that faces Long Island, and what specific legislation would you propose to address it?
You know, being a board member with Suffolk County Water Authority, it's been a premiere of a board that I sit on. And to sit there and say these detergent companies and what happened over years, that, you know, right now Suffolk County is only 30% sewered, a little over 30% sewered. And we have a problem now with the 1,4-dioxane, PFOAs, and the PFOSs, and these contaminants. And one thing that we have done with Suffolk County Water Authority is that we made sure that we were ahead of the curve. We are not for profit. We're not a taxing agency. And we made sure that we have an AOP system that will take out these contaminants with a hydrogen peroxide and ultraviolet rays. So I've been proactive with this. You know, our precious water supply and our infrastructure means everything to me to protect our environment. And I will do whatever I have to do to lobby up in Albany to make sure we put legislation forward. And I know both sides will work together to get this done, and to make sure that the funding is going to be here so we can fix the 70% that with the infrastructure problem that we do have in Suffolk County. I'm very, very pleased that Suffolk County Water Authority is ahead of the curve with this.
Thank you, Mr. Matera. Thank you. Mr. Siderakis, same question.
Yeah, I think the problems facing Long Island regarding our environment are rising seawaters. We live on an island. We should be very, very concerned about that. Clean air and our water drinking supply. I think we have to enact much stricter laws to punish polluters. We've had far too many instances of polluters out at Grumman and different locations throughout Long Island over the years have polluted the waters, and it's been a nightmare trying to get them to clean up their mess. So I think we need to enact much stronger legislation. I also think infrastructure. We really need to invest in our renewable energy and clean energy infrastructure here on Long Island. It will supply many, many jobs to those unemployed right now. And that is the way to clean our environment, make sure we eventually eliminate the use of fossil fuels, and have our future generations, give them the opportunity to enjoy the planet like we have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. You'd asked a question earlier about bipartisan working together across the aisle. Much disagreement from any of the candidates about. We are all very cognizant of the fact that whatever goes into the ground, we drink it. And again, the bipartisan nature, this is evidenced by two of the gentlemen that are on this Zoom call right now, Mr. Matera and Senator Gorin, both served together on the Suffolk County Water Commission. I think both at the same time. They can correct me on that, but I think they both served together and worked well together. Clean water is something that everybody agrees on, and I think infrastructure, septic systems, and going after polluters aggressively is something that I think everybody, at least in the Long Island delegation, regardless of political party, everybody is going to support it. I can tell you, I certainly will.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorin.
We need to implement the Climate and Community Protection Act, which I was a co-sponsor of, recognizing that climate change is real and we have to get to renewable energy. And then water. It's not only drinking water, which is, the chair of the Water Authority. I was able to use that experience to write two important bills that now actually give the Water Authority and all water districts the real ability to sue polluters, because before the laws were technically written to protect the polluters. So if you manufacture and sell something that gets into the ground, you're now going to be sued. And this is going to result in hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that otherwise our taxpayers would pay. You get a new administration in Washington, we'll get a big infrastructure bill that will funnel money to the state. We can supplement, go to the localities, upgrade sewage treatment plants, individual septic systems, and making sure that we're building, whether it's rain gardens or other filtration systems, to get our nitrates and everything that floats off our roads out of our harbors and bays in the Long Island Sound.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question starts with Mr. Siderakis. And again, with the environment, some of you are actually going into other questions, so this will give people a chance to make sure they all cover what they want. We're facing a drinking water crisis on Long Island that is largely due to septic issues, which we've touched on. What actions would you recommend? And remember, you are answering this as a New York State Senator. I'm saying this to all four of you. So it's specific recommendations to address the septic issues in Suffolk County.
Yeah, I believe our sewer systems need to be upgraded throughout the entire island. Our drinking water comes from underground, and we have to ensure that we build the proper infrastructure to treat our waste and make sure it doesn't get into our drinking water and cause carcinogens to form there and really affect people's lives. Also, on the clean energy and renewable energy, I think the bill that Senator Gorin was sponsored, I think that's a fantastic bill. I think we really need to aggressively fund programs that will increase our infrastructure in renewable and try to go fossil free within the timelines that are set in the legislation. I believe it's by 2030 to have electric vehicles, 100% electric vehicles on the road.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith? It's a connection issue. We'll move on to Mr. Gorin.
No, it's Mario. I think it's my time.
Oh, yes, sorry. See?
Is it mine? I don't know.
Yes.
It's my time? Okay. Again, I'm gonna touch on how important it is with the Suffolk County Water Authority that we are suing the people that put our contaminants down into our precious water supply. When you sit there and look at Riverhead with the state-of-the-art sewage treatment plant out in Riverhead with a sewage treatment plant that with a BTM that takes out all the contaminants, and we actually irrigate the golf course, the Suffolk County golf course out there. Very, very important that we are there regulating. Now, the state is going to be regulating that you have 1 parts per billion contaminants. Now it's 50 parts per billion. It's going to go to 1 parts per billion. And we have to make sure that that's going to come at a cost. And that's why we need to go after these detergent companies that did this to our precious water supply. And that's one thing, as a senator, I will be making sure that we are going to recover the money that is going to cost the residents and the customers of Suffolk County Water Authority.
Thank you.
So very important with the Clean Water Act.
Thank you. Mr. Gorin, it is your turn.
Yes, what I can do as a senator, again, as I alluded before, it's funding, and hopefully we'll get a big federal infrastructure money to really start doing this, because we can't afford this as just local taxpayers, and the state of New York can help some, but we really need a massive program. We can't give sewers to every home on Long Island or in Suffolk County or Nassau County. Technically, from an engineering standpoint, because we live over sole source aquifer, because we have the Long Island Sound, can't do it everywhere. But we have to first upgrade the existing systems to a higher standard, expand where we can, individual septic systems in areas where we're not going to be able to get sewers. And we also have to do it in a smart way, because sometimes if you're discharging too much water into the Long Island Sound, you're bringing it to saltwater intrusion, and that creates a problem. If you're not properly discharging into the ground with a plant that isn't working, that could create a groundwater problem. We've got to do it, but we've got to do it in a smart, safe way.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more environmental question, which I'm actually going to slightly expand. This one is going to start with Mr. Smith. I'll read the question and then I'll add a sentence. Millions of single-use plastic items, such as water bottles, are disposed of in the US every day. What would you propose at the state level to reduce our dependence on single-use plastics? But I'd also like to hear your point of view on what I think is a really huge issue, although it's not in the Huntington area, which is the closing of the Brookhaven landfill. And what do we do with our garbage? So one is about the fact that we have been so dependent on single-use products, which are adding to the garbage, and we need to get off that. But at the same time, our garbage mountains are still there. And between refuse, recyclable markets, and ash disposal, what do we do to get out from our piles of garbage? Stephanie? Yes? Okay. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'm on the telephone again. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the first step is to deal with the manufacturers and the distributors of consumer products and work together with them to reduce their packaging and also use recyclable packaging whenever it is practical. In addition to that, recycling programs at the street level, the curbside level, on a town-by-town basis have to be supported from the state. The recycling markets have plummeted as far as raw materials, so the value of recycling products is diminished significantly over the last couple of years. So we would need support for that at the local level. And also I would work on a program where crushed glass can be used in recycling for fill at construction projects. Right now it's very difficult. In fact, it's not really practical to use crushed glass when it would be appropriate. However, due to concerns with DEC, it can't be used. So I would bring those in, but most importantly, this goes back to a packaging problem. I would encourage and work with manufacturers to use recyclable and minimize the amount of packaging in their product.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gorin?
Again, aging myself, when I was a young town councilman in the 1980s, I actually created the first recycling program for the town of Huntington, including bottles and papers and plastics. And we actually solved our garbage problem. So we're not in a situation as Brookhaven. But I'm supporting numerous legislation that's going to increase the types of bottles and plastics that have to be recycled, but I'm also doing it in conjunction with the industries themselves, because it doesn't work if you don't develop this legislation in conformance with the industries themselves. And I'm also working on legislation to try to see how we can incentivize industry here in New York State. We'll take both bottles and glass and create recycling plants, because the problem is we lost the market, which was heavily in China. It's not there anymore. Used to be municipalities would get money for the recycled materials. Now they have to pay. So I think the state can help by trying to incentivize private sector to come in and do some recycling plants right here in New York State, creating jobs as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matera.
You know, I remember when we did the Islip Resource Recovery Plan, I was very excited about, not having landfills anymore. And you had all the recycling, these incinerator plants and it just protected our environment. It's just like right now with the paper straws, getting rid of the plastic straws. I mean, we could do that. It's like when you go to the supermarket and you have right now the plastic bags aren't there anymore. I think this is a great start with everything, what's happening with the plastics and everything like that. But the recycling plants, we need to make sure they're engineered properly for our future. And as a senator, I will make sure that I will be in the forefront to make sure that we're going to be protecting our environment and get away from plastics. And you know what? There's no reason why. We have cardboard containers for our milk and everything like that. And there's no reason why we can't do that with water bottles. One thing with Suffolk County Water Authority, we would be scrutinized if we use plastic water bottles. That's why we do not sell water bottles, because the environmentalists, but you know what? The water bottles that are coming from the outside aren't being regulated by the state. And that's another thing that we need to look at. Why are those water bottles being regulated? And that's something that I will work on.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Mr. Siderakis.
Yeah, with our move away from fossil fuel products, plastics is one of them. Like I said, I think we have to look at alternative materials, start spending money on different type of packaging for water. And education, I think, is key. We have to let people know how many bottles wind up in a landfill and how long it takes, for those items to decompose, over 100 years, for an item. But I think people, the more conscious they are about how dangerous it is for our environment, I think they can make smarter choices and alternative choices as to packaging of their products, and encourage the industry to move away from plastic to other materials.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next large topic is the economy, and the next person to go first is Mr. Gorin. In light of the ongoing pandemic, what support should New York State provide small business owners who are struggling to survive?
In fact, I attended through Zoom a Senate hearing for most of today where we were talking to banks and small business owners and trying to find ways that we can help them in terms of providing small business loans to try to help them get out of the serious situation we have. New York State does not have direct cash right now because, again, we're dependent on the federal government, but there is actually funding that Congressman Tom Suozzi and others sponsored in the House of Representatives that would create a revenue stream that I'm working with my colleagues to have implementation legislation to take that funding and then to give it directly to the small businesses that are hurting the most and need the most help. The way the federal program worked before, large corporations, conglomerates, they got most of the money. The mom and pops were hurt. So we got to make sure that the program, getting loans and in some cases, help with rent, goes to the restaurants that are going on, that goes to the mom and pop stores that have been here forever. And that is what I would do if I get another term.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Matera.
Again, we need to protect the mom and pops, all stores. And I have no problem with what happened with COVID-19 with, that we had, like the Lowe's and the big stores open up. But you know what? The other stores got really, really hurt. We need to make sure we protect again, the brick and mortar stores, all these stores, and have something for them if we have any kind of funding possible for them. The federal government, I know, needs to get involved and help us. I will work with the federal government to make sure that we receive the money, the 30% that we do not receive. We need to make sure we need to have a voice and someone that's going to be consistent and persistent. And I am the person for that. But we need to make sure that the large businesses that are doing very, very well, it's a level playing field So our mom and pop stores that are all around right now that are struggling, we need to make sure that the businesses are making sure that they're running the business, especially with COVID-19, the restaurants, people are making sure social distancing, wearing their masks coming in, because we're having stores that are getting fined right now, and it's not fun. So we need to make sure we protect all our
Thank you. Thank you.
businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Matera.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Siderakis.
Yeah, I just want to start off by saying our local businesses during the start of the pandemic were unfairly treated with the way they were forced to stay shut, while some other big box stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, Amazon were able to make some record profits. I think we have to sit down and come up with a plan for any future incidents like this, where we can have a more fairer system on how businesses can remain safe, public remain safe, and still do business at the same time. But our biggest issue here is the federal funding. You know, New York State is going to have a $64 billion budget cut between now and 2024 is what estimated by the governor's office. So we're going to really need to have our elected officials, our congressmen, our senators, push for the funding that we deserve and that we've contributed over many, many years to help other states make sure that money comes back here to help our small businesses and help them facilitate loans and grants to stay open.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, 1 minute.
Yeah, the first thing the state of New York can do to reopen the economy is get out of the way. The crisis of the coronavirus is still a very serious issue. However, it's no longer an emergency. The legislature should take back its authority and its governmental role from the governor and get back engaged in the process of reopening our economy safely. I think business owners understand that patrons need to wear masks and provide sanitizer and all of these things, but one size will not fit all. So each individual industry must be allowed to come up with what works for them. A electrical contractor or a gym or a restaurant all have very different needs. So the state government needs to get out of the way. As far as funding, as the prior speakers have said, it's going to come from the Small Business Administration at the federal level. But I was at a press conference today organized by gyms, fitness studios, and yoga studios, where the disparity in treatment with one business to the next, it makes no sense. And there's very little science left behind what's going on.
Thank you very much. The next question will start with Mr. Matera. It's a little bit long, so please listen. Eliminating disparities in the resources available between school children living in lower income and higher income communities is complicated. Despite efforts to amend state tax law apportionments, higher income communities are more willing and able to commit to allocating more funding to their school districts. Increasing school taxes hits lower income communities harder. What solutions, if any, do you propose to address the problem as it exists for both school children and taxpayers?
Well, everybody needs to get their fair share in the school districts. And as senator, I will make sure that it doesn't make a difference what area it is, but we need to make sure that Long Island is receiving the fair share that we have. Right now, New York City is receiving more of our school tax money than we are. So again, as a state senator, I'm going to make sure that all the Long Island schools will be receiving the fair share so everybody gets the proper education. Because without education, our kids are in trouble. And we need to get our students back to school. Right now, what's happening with COVID-19, you know, it's not full-time school. The kids, the educators are having a hard time what's happening. And we right now, we're in desperate times and desperate needs to make sure that we receive our fair share that we are not receiving. And I will be the voice to make sure that everybody on Long Island money is going to be coming back home and making sure that all the schools get their proper funding.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Siderakis.
Sure. Well, we all know that education is key in someone's success. We know the earlier you start education with a child, the better the outcome is when they become adults. But we have to make sure that children across the state have equal access to education, no matter what town you live, zip code, a village. We need to focus more on a state level of funding to make sure that uh, communities that are more affluent and have the resources and taxable base don't receive higher education benefits than those in lower affluent school districts. So we have to make sure that there's more state involvement and more funding directly from the state to each school district throughout the state.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, 1 minute.
Sure. I think a lot of the parents in the affluent school districts would be surprised to learn that they're considered affluent. When I talk to constituents, all they talk about, not all they talk about, but one of the big things is the high cost of living on Long Island and how their personal finances are stretched to the limit. So, to categorize them as wealthy school districts, they would, I think, it would surprise a lot of people. I don't think that the children in the Walt Whitman School District or Half Hollow Hills or anywhere else in the district would be pleased to find out that they're financing the educations of kids in the Yonkers School District with their $24 million that they received over the last 2 years, when foundation aid to our local districts has been cut on an annual basis to zero. So education is extremely important. I think with the coronavirus, while I'm a debt hawk, I will tell you that economists refer to something like this as a black swan event, something that came out of nowhere. And if necessary, I think it's one area that this limited basis I would consider going into debt to pay for education.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorin.
Well, I'm very proud of my record of bringing more money and record increases to all the school districts that I represent in my district. And the first year and the second year, yes, foundation aid, all aid had to be frozen because every single budget item in the state budget had to be frozen at the same level because of COVID. And that's why we've got to get our fair share of money from the federal government so that we can avoid cuts. And I'm very proud of the 2% property tax cap because I think that protects us here on Long Island. But we've got to move, and it's going to take a few years, off the property tax as much as we can and have more of it paid for by state income taxes, so it helps our kids in all school districts, fully fund foundation aid, but also make sure that we're protecting the taxpayers. And we do have to look not just at cost of living, but some of the money going to some of the upstate schools, their population has declined significantly. So that is something I'm going to be really pushing for to make sure all our kids have the best opportunity for their futures.
Okay, thank you. We'll start the next question with Mr. Siderakis. This one's on healthcare. Pediatricians have a difficult time getting their patients the mental health care they need because mental health services frequently require greater out-of-pocket payments. While Medicaid is the largest single payer for mental health services in the US, private insurances routinely require greater out-of-pocket payments for these services. What should New York State do or not do to make patient access to mental health care services more affordable?
That's a great question. And I think the state can do a lot. I think healthcare is one of the most pressing issues to people today. COVID-19, has shown us that there are many, many inequities in the entire healthcare system, not just in services for mental health, but services for healthcare in general to all New Yorkers. So we have to make sure that we come up with a plan that will provide affordable, a full-service health plan to New Yorkers. And one option could be with the federal. We would need assistance and okay from the federal government. Maybe to offer alternative Medicare buy-in, where people can have a larger choice. Private insurance and an option to buy into possibly having Medicare insurance. So we have to be very creative when it comes to healthcare, and we have to look at many, many different ways that we've never thought of before. And we need to get as many of our New Yorkers, or all our New Yorkers, covered by health insurance.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
On the Medicaid front, just since January of this year, Comptroller DiNapoli has uncovered $1.5 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. I think, encouraging to continue doing that and drilling down and finding wasted money in the system and putting it towards mental health would be a great starting point. I think also allowing for medical co-ops to thrive. Also, health savings accounts are another alternative. As the prior speaker said, we have to look at everything. I completely agree with that. Put everything on the table and find out what works. It can't be a one-size-fits-all program. I think one of the great causes of problems across the board in society in general is mental health issues, addiction, alcoholism. These are a ongoing problem across all socio and economic boundaries, and it's something that we for decades haven't taken seriously, and it's something that has to be a front burner issue going forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorin.
Among the first people I met when I took office up in Albany were a group of very brave and hardworking correction officers. And they said to me that their biggest issue is that most of the people a good percent of the people that they're dealing with have mental health issues and shouldn't be there in the first place. And that they become mental health counselors and they don't really have the training other than, the training that they're given as correction officers. We have failed our mental health population in this state for decades. And so there is legislation that I'm supporting that would mandate that insurance companies cover mental health. And also, I believe hopefully President Biden has a plan that through Obamacare will expand to make sure that we have more funding for mental health care. And then we as the state have to make sure that we're accepting those funds and implementing those funds.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera?
With COVID-19, it just put people in a lot of bad situations right now with mental health, alcohol and drug abuse and everything like that. We have to be there for our residents, especially now with these trying times. So we need to, reality is less than 5% of our state is without health care, which while right now is just too many. But to sit there and not be there for anybody right now with our mental health and our health care, I want to make sure that whatever we have to do to take steps to have an increase in outreach programs, reduce the cost by cutting taxes and fees, provide incentives for getting insurance, provide high deductible plans too. We need to make sure we look into this healthcare situation with our union. Every 2 years we have to look into new providers. So I know what it takes to look into better solutions. And again, we need to be there for our people with mental health care problems.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question on education, and I think in our districts represented here in Suffolk County, this is important. The pandemic has private and public colleges desperate for resources, with the possibility of some private colleges being forced to close. What's your stance on funding for these private colleges, as well as maintaining the quality of New York State schools of higher education? That one would start with Mr. Smith.
Well, I would first start by saying that, we would provide any assistance we can to these colleges. The state would primarily be responsible for the state colleges as a priority. There are a lot of colleges that have died off prior to the coronavirus that simply because they were not competitive, they were not putting out a competitive product, namely students who graduated with a marketable career and a marketable education. And that has happened many times in the past throughout our country's history, where colleges closed en masse. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the colleges that did not focus on marketable skills in the workplace are going to be the first ones to suffer. And we'll do whatever we can to support them. But if the students themselves can't support the college through their tuition, and the students themselves and the alumni can't support the college because they're not supporting it in the endowment, then the marketplace is going to have an unmutable effect.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera, I'm sorry, Mr. Gorin.
Well, there are some in society today that believe that all our colleges do is simply indoctrinate our students and no longer educate them. I disagree. I think our colleges, both private and public, do a fantastic job, and they've been working even harder during this difficult economic. We do have to put the focus in the state on protecting our public colleges, particularly our community colleges, which the state helps to fund along with the county, because so many parents are sending their young people to community colleges for at least a couple of years because they can't afford some of the private colleges. On the private colleges, I've been working to increase the amount of grant money that is given to parents based on raising the income levels. And again, I know the Biden plan is going to push lots of more money into the system so that our kids can get a quality higher education and not be stuck with all this debt.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matera? I'm sorry, sorry. Where am I? Yes, Mr. Matera.
Yeah, the debt with these kids is just astronomical. It's just terrible. My daughter right now, we're looking for a college with her, and we're actually my daughter Jessica. She went up to Sacred Heart, and she came back home, went to Suffolk Community College, and then she got into Stony Brook. The private schools, we have to make sure we're looking at how it's a business and how they're running their business, and see what we could do to help them and make sure it's managed properly. And that's a big plus right now. But the enrollment is going to be different. COVID right now, these kids are going to school, and right now they're going to college, and they're in their dorm rooms, and they're doing virtual. And we're praying that, in other words, 2021 is going to be a little bit different. But right now, all colleges are in trouble. You can see what's happening with colleges right now with the enrollment. They're looking to do whatever to do with scholarships, anything possible for our children to go to their schools. This is a very good question. The last thing we want to do is see any private schools and have these empty schools, just like with Dowling College that's sitting there still empty. It's something that we need to look into to see what we could do to help them with anything with management, with anything for them to manage properly.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Siderakis.
Yes, higher education, the cost has skyrocketed in the past 10 years. 20 plus years ago when I was a student at a city university in New York, Baruch College. I think it's very important that we fund our public colleges in New York State and allow people the option, because some private colleges are just out of the reach. And like our senator said, community college also is an option, and we have to make sure that we properly fund them. I think the governor's Excelsior program, where we allow students making under a certain amount, I think we need to expand that, making less than 150,000, I believe, going to a state university, and having those loans forgiven if they stay within the state and give back to New York once they graduate. So I think we have to look at a lot of options, a lot of ways to try to bring down that cost and reduce the debt of our students once they do graduate and start working.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've skipped a couple of questions, and the way our timing is worked out right now, and I, as the moderator, I'm making an executive decision here that I'm going to ask each of you to do your closing in 2 minutes rather than one, because it was very staccato because we covered a lot of ground and a minute is a very short period of time. Also, the instructions are that we do the order of closing exactly the same as the order of opening. So the people's closing order is Mr. Matera, Mr. Siderakis, Mr. Smith, and then Mr. Gorin. You don't have to use the 2 minutes, but I won't interrupt you until you're at the 2 minute mark. So Mr. Matera, your closing statement. Why should the people watching this debate vote for you?
Okay, and I thank you so much, the Women's League. I thank you so much for hosting this event, because you know what? I've been proven. I'm a proven leader with Plumbers Local 200. First of all, let's talk about family. I'm a family man. Family values mean everything to me. Without family, we have nothing. But I've been a proven leader with Plumbers Local 200 to make sure I made sure that people had careers, from my apprentices to mechanics. Very proud of that. I've been proven to make sure that people ask me to be put on boards, to be on Suffolk County Water Authority. Very proud of 6 years. Suffolk County Consumers Affairs Board, 9 years. St. Catherine's Advisory Board, 4 years. St. James Civic, for making sure that we're moving forward with the town of Smithtown, 2 years. Smithtown Advisory Board with our great supervisor, Wareheim, of Smithtown and all council people. I've been on that board for over a year. You know, sitting on the Suffolk County District Attorney's Advisory Board for unscrupulous contractors. And you know what, Mr. Siderakis, I know what I do. I know, you know, this is desperate measures for you right now, what's happening. But I am very, very proud with my record and what I've done to making sure that I got people's careers, for their lives, for their futures. I know what it takes to make sure to sit down, working across the table to get the job done. Roll your sleeves up the old-fashioned way. Let's sit there. I would have made sure that the funding of the precinct wouldn't have been in 1 week that legislation got passed that hurt our men and women in law enforcement. So again, I know what it takes. I know what it takes to work with both sides and to make sure to get the job done. So again, I know I will, in November 3rd, I am asking for everybody to please vote for Mario Matera, 2nd Senate seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Matera. Mr. Siderakis, up to 2 minutes.
Sure, I just wanted to add to that, Mr. Matera, you're absolutely right. We are in desperate times. This is one of the most important elections in our lifetime, from the federal government down to the local level. Every single state Senate seat is important here. We have to make a decision who is going to be capable of getting us out of the hole that we're in, that was caused by COVID-19 and possibly by the president. I've already served in public service. I didn't get into public service for the money. I decided to become a New York State trooper because I truly wanted to serve the community. And I've done that for almost 3 decades. I know my skills. I've worked as a New York State trooper. I was elected as the 2nd vice president and legislative director of the New York State Troopers Police Benevolent Association. I've advocated for law enforcement. I've worked on 50A bill up in Albany, not just talk about it, not just sit there and say, I support law enforcement. I actually did go up to Albany and support law enforcement in my position as 2nd vice president. As far as the union support that you mentioned, we all know that's very political decision. Many of the unions that supported you supported many Democrats in the last senatorial election in New York. And I understand their anger and why they decided to support Republicans. I'm sure if I was on the Republican ticket, they would have been supporting me as well. So I understand their anger, and I have issues also. Bail reform is absolutely necessary thing that had to be addressed. The way it was done, I think the way the governor put it into the budget rather than a standalone bill is what hurt us most. Not being able to hold a hearing and actually discuss the issue. A lot of senators were handcuffed. They had to decide whether they were going to vote for the budget, up or down, and didn't have a choice on how the bill passed. So I'm sure many of them would have wanted to do it differently, but I think we have to stop the practice of putting important legislation like the bail reform into the budget and just slipping it through.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siderakis. Mr. Smith, on the phone, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I'd just like to thank once again the League of Women Voters for putting this together, and apologize to everybody for my technical difficulties, and forgive me for being on the phone. I'm running because I think New York is heading in the wrong direction. I think across the board, there's so many issues that people just shake their head when you talk about them, whether it be the criminal justice system, whether it be policing, whether it be the quarantine that's ongoing. I would work diligently in Albany for education, for the environment, and for public health. I would first and foremost work tirelessly to bring term limits to every elected official, to every elected office in this state. I think it is something that is long overdue. It's something that works. It is one of the greatest tools to stop entrenched politicians from staying there forever, and also to bring new ideas into the public discussion. So I'm a huge believer in term limits. I'm the son of 2 immigrants. My parents' top priority for me was education, and it's a common theme among immigrants that education. My parents used to say, no, still do, education is no load to carry. I would make school funding a priority. I would do everything we can to restore funding to our suburban schools, and make sure that they have the resources that they need. I would work with anybody who's willing to work with me on common sense legislation for limited, transparent, and accountable government. That's my North Star, is common sense legislation. And if elected, and I hope people will consider voting for me on November 3rd, but I would stress that you'll get nothing but common sense from me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Gorin.
First of all, I want to thank the League. I want to thank our 5 Towns College team and my candidate colleagues for what I thought has been a very fruitful discussion. I've talked about my record. I'm very proud of what I've been able to accomplish in the 2 years in the state Senate. And I really believe that my 40 years as an attorney and a businessman in the private sector, plus my career over almost 30 years ago when I was in public office, has really given me the ability to accomplish a lot in 2 years. I've passed more legislation that I've written myself than many senators who have served for a decade or more, and I'm very proud of that. And I believe that with a second term, I can do a lot more. I was the one who stepped in, and I did vote for the budget, which included the bail reforms, because I believe people are innocent until proven guilty. At the same time, things had to be fixed. I learned the budget system a little bit better the next time, and I was one who led the effort to get it to a point where judges do now have the discretion for serious crimes, regardless of how it is being mischaracterized. But in terms of COVID-19, I do not believe in just opening up the entire society without looking at the science at all. We've got to do it as quickly as possible, but we have got to do it safely. I was in a room with some colleagues, with Dr. Zucker, the health commissioner, where he announced before everyone else knew that New York had the first death. And we're all sitting there saying, wow, this is real. And then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and it turned into a crisis. There was no guidebook as to how to get out of this, but I did support giving the governor the powers to move forward, protect us. We do need to keep the numbers down, and we do need to reopen our schools and our economy fully, but safely. And I want to just thank everybody and ask the voters of the 2nd District to give me the opportunity to continue to serve.
Okay.
But 5th District. Mary, you got me confused.
No, we don't have 3 in that race.
Senator, I support the 2nd District voting for you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, again, I'd like to thank our 4 candidates, Mr. Smith and Mr. Gorin in the 5th Senatorial District, and Mr. Siderakis and Mr. Matera in the second. I want you all to remember the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We are not bipartisan. We absolutely do not support or oppose candidates or issues. We believe, however, in advocacy. Once someone's elected, we like to get our points across, but we believe in a very even-handed educational approach. I hope we've achieved that with this forum today. I'd like to thank Stephanie Quarles for doing the timer. And again, everyone at the League of Women Voters of Huntington, which I am not a member of, because they've done a fabulous job with voter registration, voter education, voter service this year. And above all, we want to encourage people to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa and Stephanie. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.